All right, welcome. We've got a lot to cover from the last 24 hours. We're talking everything from major shifts on the battlefields in Ukraine all the way to some pretty incredible scientific breakthroughs. So let's just jump right into the headlines.
Kicking things off, there's been a serious escalation in the war in Ukraine. We're seeing Russian forces use a powerful new weapon for the very first time.
Then, shifting over to the world of finance, there's this really intense debate heating up about who actually gets access to a bank account and why. It's raising some big questions about transparency and whether politics is playing a role.
And finally, we're going to look to the future a bit. We'll get into some key scientific and tech advancements in energy, sustainability, and medicine that are really poised to make a big impact this year. Okay, so here's how we're breaking it all down today. We've got 4 main parts. We'll start with the latest on the war in Ukraine, then we'll switch gears to that debate in the banking world. After that, we'll check out those exciting scientific breakthroughs, and then we'll finish up by taking a look at American politics and culture. All right, let's dive into our first topic, the war in Ukraine. To really get a handle on what's happening, we're looking at the latest intel from the Institute for the Study of War. They're tracking all the big moves, both on the ground and in the air. So this is a really big deal. Russia using this Oreshnik missile. It's not just about a new piece of hardware. It's a message. Hitting the Lviv region with a ballistic missile for the first time, well, that's Moscow showing off its long-range power. It feels like a clear warning, an attempt to make the West think twice about its support for Ukraine. And you know, that missile was just one part of a much bigger, coordinated attack. We're talking about a massive barrage, 278 projectiles in total, that just rained down on Ukraine. It knocked out power, plunged entire areas into darkness. The Kiev region really took the hardest hit. The scale of this thing, it just screams escalation. Meanwhile, on the ground, the front lines are anything but static. This snapshot from the ISW gives you a sense of it. You can see Russian forces are making gains in Sumy Oblast and around Konstantinivka. But it's not a one-way street. Ukraine is pushing back, making some advances of its own near Huliopole. It's just a brutal, relentless fight, back and forth, all along the front. And the raw brutality of this war, it's just laid bare in this really chilling audio intercept. Ukraine's military intelligence released it, and it allegedly catches a Russian commander giving the order to take no one prisoner. This isn't some one-off thing either. It seems to be part of a really disturbing pattern of alleged war crimes, which suggests this could be a deliberate policy coming from some parts of the Russian command. Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving from the battlefields of Ukraine to the boardrooms of the financial world. We're going to take a closer look at this growing debate, all about who gets a bank account and, more importantly, why. So, there was this recent Federalist Society panel that really dug into a core question: who gets to bank and why? The whole conversation is focused on this idea of politicized debanking. Basically, the fear that banks might be shutting people out not because of their finances, but because of their politics.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. On one hand, you've got the push for transparency. John Burlaw argues that, look, banks should just be able to tell you exactly why they closed your account. Simple. But on the other hand, Brian Knight points out that it's not that simple. There are laws, like the ones about suspicious activity reports, that actually forbid banks from sharing that exact information. So they're stuck. It's a classic catch-22.
Now, tied into all this, but a separate issue, is the constant problem of fraud. And one of the biggest tricks in the book that criminals use is something called call spoofing. I'm sure you've seen this. It's where they fake their phone number so it looks like your bank is calling, all to trick you into handing over your info. So the banking industry is really pushing back on this. The Bank Policy Institute sent this pretty strongly worded letter to the FCC, basically telling telecom companies they need to step up their game and do more to stop these fake calls and texts. Their point is pretty straightforward. Banks are pouring tons of money into fighting fraud, but they feel the phone companies just aren't keeping up.
Okay, time for a look ahead. Let's switch over to the world of science and check out some of the amazing breakthroughs that could really start changing things for all of us in 2026.
First up, this is a huge deal for solar power. These new hybrid solar cells, look at that jump in efficiency. We're going from around 24% with traditional panels to over 34%. What that really means is you can get way more power out of a much smaller space. Think city rooftops, cars, you name it. And the best part? They're expected to actually hit the market this year. You know all that clothing made from a mix of cotton and polyester? It's a huge headache for recycling. But check this out. There's a new process that uses hydrochloric acid to neatly split them apart. You get the cotton back as glucose and the polyester back as monomers with a really high recovery rate. A demo plan is actually launching in 2026, which could be a massive step towards solving the fashion industry's giant waste problem. And in biotech, keep an eye on this: cell-free biomanufacturing. The easiest way to think about it is like a portable, on-demand biology factory. You have these little freeze-dried kits that can whip up proteins, enzymes, diagnostics, whatever you need right on the spot. No giant lab required. This could totally change the game for emergency response, especially in places that are hard to get to.
All right, for our last section, let's turn to the U.S. and take a look at the political and cultural mood right now. We're going to touch on some recent commentary from the writer Garrison Keillor.
So in a recent piece, Garrison Keillor gives a pretty stark take on American politics. He describes a nation he sees as being in decline, led by someone he calls a proud bully. He even throws out the possibility that the 2026 election could be canceled. It's a very pointed and definitely controversial perspective on where things stand today.
But he wraps up his piece with this really powerful thought about being creative when things feel chaotic. He brings up Van Gogh, who took all his inner turmoil and poured it into his painting. And for Keillor, that's the choice we all have, to create or to destroy. He says that's what makes the difference, and it's a message that really goes way beyond just politics.
So there you have it. From the front lines in Ukraine all the way to the frontiers of science, these are the key stories shaping our world over the last day. We'll be back here in another 24 hours with the next update so you can stay on top of how all these stories are developing.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. If you got something out of this, we'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more explainers on the stories that matter.